You may have noticed that we at GOA have been seriously critical of Pam Bondi in the Department of Justice. But the thing is, we're not the only ones. Most, if not all, of the other major gun groups have started to turn against the DOJ, and for good reason. The Department of Justice under Pam Bondi has repeatedly chosen to fight against Second Amendment rights. This is despite DOJ's claim to be the most pro-Second Amendment DOJ in history. Today, we're going to take a look at the overall critiques of the DOJ from all across the spectrum of gun rights organizations. And we'll focus on what the Trump administration needs to do to fix things with gun owners. Otherwise, this administration might take for granted the valuable gun owner vote in the midterms, and Republicans might be in for quite a surprise. Hi, I'm Ben, and you're watching the Minuteman Moment. With the Department of Justice opposing us in our one big beautiful lawsuit, our fight against the National Firearms Act just got harder. Thankfully, at GOA, we're no strangers to doing the work and fighting for the Second Amendment. Please consider becoming a member and helping us work to free short-barreled firearms, AOWs, and suppressors from the ATF's tyrannical registration requirements. Okay, now back to the video. The criticisms from major gun rights group of Pam Bondi and her Department of Justice have been mounting over the past few months. DOJ is well aware of the growing anger from gun groups, who are echoing the millions of gun owners they represent. Recently, Pam Bondi and the Department of Justice attempted to save face, pointing to the fact that they just filed a pro-gun amicus brief in the Supreme Court case Wilford v. Lopez. And a few days ago, it was leaked to the media that the Department of Justice will be opening a gun rights office within its existing civil rights unit. But while these actions are certainly worthy of praise, they are too little, too late in the eyes of many gun owners, who have been paying close attention to the absolute mess that Pam Bondi's Department of Justice has made fighting pro-gun groups on numerous Second Amendment issues. Of course, time will tell if the office is actually able to accomplish anything in these next 3 years. And based on DOJ's past performance on gun rights, we're not holding our breath. As you can probably tell, we at GOA are pretty frustrated with the Department of Justice, a fact that many viewers of this channel know pretty well at this point. But we have good reasons for that. Right now, the Bondi Department of Justice is actively fighting against us in all of our cases against the federal government. Most significantly, DOJ has opposed us in our one big beautiful lawsuit against the National Firearms Act. The Bondi DOJ is arguing that the government can ban particularly dangerous weapons that are uniquely susceptible to criminal misuse. A totally meaningless standard that you'd expect to hear from gun grabbers in California, not the allegedly most pro-Second Amendment administration in history. With friends like these, who needs enemies? DOJ is also attempting to moot our lawsuit against the Biden-era zero-tolerance FFL revocation policy, which shut down hundreds of gun stores. DOJ wants our cases to simply fade away instead of securing permanent judgments from the courts that would prevent the next ATF and the next Democrat administration from simply putting the same policy back into effect. The same is true for our challenge to the Biden-era engaged in the business rule, which in Biden's words, tried to move the country as close to universal background checks as possible. Even though members of the Trump administration have openly criticized this rule as unconstitutional, it's a different story on the ground with DOJ. DOJ wants our cases to simply fade away, instead of securing permanent judgments from the courts which prevent the next ATF and the next anti-gun Democrat administration from simply putting the same policy back into effect. DOJ also doesn't want us to get paid, even though we won a challenge to the first Trump administration's bump stock rule, which entitled us to attorney's fees. Pam Bondi's DOJ fought that too. But that's no way to treat friends. When the ACLU challenged one of President Trump's first border policies in court, ironically also called zero tolerance, the DOJ changed its tune the moment Biden took office in 2020. It agreed with the ACLU plaintiffs, consented to an injunction, and paid the ACLU $6 million in attorney's fees. That's how the Democrats treat their friends when they're in charge. But for us, we couldn't even get less than 1/10 of that. That means we had to tap into precious donations from GOA members to fund legal bills that, by law, the government should have been covered. Rather than help us secure lasting victories on these important issues, the DOJ is fighting to prevent just that, naively arguing the ATF has changed its ways and turned over a new leaf. There's no reason to believe that the ATF will reoffend.
By rescinding and replacing the challenge guidance, ATF has given plaintiffs all the relief they could hope for in this case, and this appeal should be dismissed as moot.
What do we say about the fact that it was the first Trump administration that did it? It's the second that's reversing. What's to say, still 3+ more years to change again?
I just don't think there's any plausible basis in the record for thinking that the ATF is going to do that, Your Honor. And so I don't think there's any basis for believing that the conduct the plaintiffs are challenging is going to occur, and certainly not in the foreseeable future. Again, I just don't think there's any basis for thinking that ATF is going to do that at any point.
Why don't Pam Bondi and the DOJ want to secure permanent Second Amendment victories that will protect gun owners in the future? Rather, DOJ is hell-bent on preserving bureaucratic power, and it's fighting GOA tooth and nail to prevent us from making a lasting impact for Second Amendment rights. This is exactly the opposite of what gun owners voted for. We hope the DOJ isn't trying to moot our cases just to ensure that gun owners keep voting for Republicans in the future elections. Too cynical? Maybe. But at this rate, a Democrat return to power would mean all the gun control we fought so hard to stop in court would be immediately back on the table. More and more, this administration is starting to feel like a rapidly wasted opportunity for real change in the Second Amendment space. All because of this DOJ. An election like President Trump's happens only once in a generation, if that. And it seems like the only thing standing in the way of a truly pro-Second administration is DOJ personnel who just don't understand the importance of constitutional rights. Of course, we at GOA aren't the only ones who are unhappy. Other groups like Firearms Policy Coalition, the Second Amendment Foundation, the National Association for Gun Rights have all spoken out in recent weeks about their problems with the Bondi Department of Justice. In fact, many of these groups were with us at the start, sharing our skepticism of Bondi's nomination due to the fact that, as Florida Attorney General, she fought for red flag laws and bans on certain types of rifles for those under 21. In some ways, the Giffords Law Center foreshadowed current issues, when they of all people celebrated Pam Bondi's confirmation as Attorney General. The Trump administration should have known that something was up. Why else would an anti-gun organization like Giffords celebrate Pam Bondi's nomination? Well, it's because Pam Bondi has ensured that gun rights are not a priority for the Department of Justice, despite all the pro-2A optics. And DOJ has worked hard to undermine not just our cases, but others. Take the recent Second Amendment Foundation and Firearms Policy Coalition case Reese v. ATF, where a federal judge, at DOJ's request, recently ordered that SAF and FPC turn over their membership list to the government as a condition of victory in court. Not only did the Department of Justice try to limit relief just to those named plaintiffs, but it also claimed that, without a list of those organizations' verified members, the injunction in that case would be unworkable. Wait, what? The DOJ has already agreed that the law SAF and FPC challenge was unconstitutional. So why not just agree not to enforce it against anyone? But instead, the DOJ apparently wanted to continue enforcing an admittedly unconstitutional gun law against as many people as possible. That's not pro-gun. And DOJ also adopted the cutesy view that only the members of SAF and FPC deserve protection, in a case fighting for the rights of 18 to 20-year-olds, were people that had been members in 2020, 5 years ago. In other words, DOJ argued that the only young adults who were entitled to exercise their Second Amendment rights were those who had already aged out of the 18 to 20-year-old category. And while DOJ responded to the backlash from gun owners and asked the judge to withdraw the order DOJ asked for, the fact remains that DOJ worked to create these conditions in the first place. DOJ should have known better. The National Association for Gun Rights has also voiced its displeasure with the Department of Justice. So there you have it. The nation's most active gun groups are united in their belief that DOJ is on the wrong path, and that the administration is not adopting pro-gun policies, and that Pam Bondi's leadership of DOJ is not helping Second Amendment rights. DOJ has claimed that it's the most pro-gun Department of Justice ever. Well, that's a pretty low standard to beat. But if Pam Bondi truly wants the title, then she should order the Department of Justice to stop fighting GOA, FPC, SEF, and NAGR, and others in our cases, and work with us to secure lasting judgments that protect gun owners and the Second Amendment. Now, thanks for watching. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe to stay up to date with GOA's latest fights for your rights.